Hi, welcome to my journey. Today we are getting out at nighttime, right? Maybe we could see some Christmas lights. Yes, it's the 22nd of December. 3 days until Christmas. Okay. So I've been trying to figure out, why people think, the cruelty ain't gonna hit them. Right? People like to believe that they're the apex predator, or they're in the alpha group, right? And there's nothing wrong with thinking that. However, everybody has to deal with the things that go on in our society, one way or another, right? You may be, one of those people who don't know how to feel pain, right? But, it's painful if something was to hit your loved ones. Karma is really a bitch. It really is. Okay? It really, really is. So, you may be sitting up there thinking, oh, you're in the clear, even if you was to die tomorrow, you lived a full life, right? And it's like, you just totally forgot about your son, right? And you swear up and down that you can handle your son suffering, but that ain't true. It's not. So, even myself, right? I romantically wish, that my kids, could see things my way. Even though they probably won't do it while I'm alive. Right? It takes decades for them to even, match the dots up that some of the things that they may have watched me, feel as if it was challenging for me, that they too now have to feel like it's challenging for them. Right? And I'll tell you, the biggest part, right, for like Gen Z, right? Gen Z swore up and down they would never, ever, ever, have, financial problems. They'll never let their credit score go down. Nothing, right? And I said, yeah, I understand that that's how you feel. I said, but sometimes things happen. Sometimes things happen. And, and they're like what? Like what? And I'm like, it could be anything, how you lose your job. You could get sick. Or, God knows, you could be faced with a time where there's just no jobs available. Right? They haven't never heard of, there ain't no jobs available. Okay? So when there ain't no jobs available, you got to have good credit in order to qualify for a loan to even open up a business. Majority of people, they don't even want to have a loan to open up a business. The majority of people. Now, there are people out there that don't mind opening up a business with a loan if they separate their personal property, their personal assets, right, from their business. Okay? And you do that through LLCs, and you do that through, incorporations. Right? Problem with incorporations is you can get a hostile takeover. You can lose it all. Okay? Especially if you don't make sure that you always have at least 51% of the votes. All right? And that gets real difficult to keep up with when, people, start, splitting the shares up. You start splitting up the shares, you have to keep count. You got to keep count how many shares are out there. You won't know. You won't even know when that time comes and you don't own 50% of the shares. You thought you owned 50% of the shares, but they done chopped it up so bad that now you only own 49%. Oh my. So that's somebody speeding down the highway at about, what? They done lifted the speed limit to 70 miles an hour out here. And that's super crazy. So that's what they done did with your money, y'all. What they did with your money is they voted to raise the speed limits to 70 and 80 miles an hour. And the signs that, they have to make in order to create that and to change the laws. Yeah. Right? Because they have to change the laws. It's got to be changed in the courtroom. Penalties have to be adjusted. This is what they decided to do with your money at the local level. This ain't federal. So, while we're on the subject of money, right? They have several apps that you have to pay on nowadays, right? And there are certain apps that only allow you to pay on the apps if you're within 30 to 45 days of the due date of the payment due date. Okay? Otherwise, then you have to call the business and negotiate, right? Negotiate payment arrangements or a double payment. This is how they wanted to mess up the protection of an FHA. Because I know a lot of you couldn't figure out, well, if you have the protection of an FHA or a VA, they're not supposed to be able to just, take your property if you're late, right? Because of course, you've gotten, the government to back your loan and say, hey, this is a good person. They might be late, but statistically, their numbers look like, they'll probably make good on their loan. Not so much for like conventional loans, like where somebody gets a conventional loan and they got one of those, bad credit loans. No, if you get a bad credit loan and it's a conventional loan, you're not going to have the protection, right? They're going to make you pay everything that's owed, including fees. Now, I was looking at this app, right? And it has stated late fees, and then it had added an additional $50 fees. I tried to find out what the $50 fee was. It wouldn't define what that $50 fee was. And I was like, wow, right? And I'm saying this because, I paid late on my mortgage. I hadn't been late on my mortgage since they held my last check at AT&T in 2019. Okay? So I don't have a history of being late. Okay? So I was trying to figure out, because there have been a lot of people out there that, are suffering because they don't have an FHA loan or a VA loan. And it's kind of like, when you have your car loan, right? And, time, here and there, you make a late payment, you pay the late fees, and you go on with your life as normal, right? Except when they get tired of your ass, right? When the finance company gets tired of your ass, they tell you, no, we're not going to take last month's payment. We want you to pay everything that's owed right now up front before we even continue business with you. Otherwise, just believe you got a repo on your hands, right? That's how they're starting to use the same techniques of the repo man now on home loans, right? Like say you're in the second month late on your vehicle, right? You're on your second month late on your vehicle, and so you're like, damn, let me show them good faith. I'm gonna pay last month, and I'm gonna keep, trying to, make this shit up, because jobs are tight out here, and even if you get a job, don't mean that you'll be getting good money, right? So the thing about it is, the people that are getting affected by this situation are the poor people. The poor people are the ones that are really hurting, right? And it's, again, like I said, it's not the rich. that is making this happen. These are the people that want to be rich. This is the middle class. And, well, it's not the wealthy. Let me say it like that. It's not the wealthy that are causing these problems. It's the rich. The rich are people who are debt heavy, right? They're debt heavy. But, you know, they have more privileges because they're doing a lot of business out here. So it looks like they got it going on, except, you know, when you find out these people are working every single day of the week, you know, around the clock. They're working, right? Because, you know, you can hear people talk about, oh, they're an entrepreneur, and a business person. That don't mean that they're wealthy, right? Foreigners understand this because a lot of them are entrepreneurs. A lot of foreigners are entrepreneurs. But a lot of them, they're living check to check, right? And of course, you know, as a business person, you know, you got to have goodwill, or you should have goodwill. You should have goodwill in order for, you know, them not to call in your loan. Right? But it's these same people, right, that are now moving up the hierarchy because of their age, right? They're now 40 and 50 years old, you know, and you know, they remember those tactics that happened to them when, you know, they were taking those, you know, buy here, pay here car loans, you know, when they were, you know, buying those exotic drive now cars, you know, because, you know, they were like fancy free, right? They figured, you know, they didn't want to settle down. They didn't want to have a house. They didn't want to plan and all of this stuff, right? But now that they want to do all of that stuff in their 40s and 50s, you know, they're trying to think of every possible way to catch up, right? And it's starting to look like a condiment. It is. It's starting to look like a condiment. Because the ketchup is causing inflation. Inflation is causing a depreciation of the dollar. And even when they were sitting up there thinking, oh, well, I'll just go live in Taiwan or the Philippines or Korea, or, you know, they was thinking like that. But, you know, there's been too much talk about gentrification. So now, while they're out there, they're starting to see more and more countries are saying, you know, and if you can't prove that you're a citizen, you know, we're going to charge you the foreign rate. So what might have cost 50 cents for a citizen, it's going to cost them $2 for being a foreigner. Why? Because they don't want this gentrification happening in their country. Because that's what these young dudes had did. These young dudes have went to these foreign countries. Not only was they committing gentrification, a lot of them have found connections, you know, to job to people that will work for them, and then they was, exporting that over to America, or should I say importing, because they really didn't have a license to do business, but they would have those people ship that stuff over there to America. And you should have seen that the way that they was even traveling. If you watch some of the border control videos out there, that these people was doing business while pretending to be on a vacation trip, right? So they would have like hundreds of a certain item that they bought in a foreign country and bring it back to the States or wherever, and not declare it, for business taxes, right? And so what TSA will do is they would find that stuff and make them pay their taxes to release that stuff, even if they say, nah, I just love, these leggings, and I just wanted 1,000 pair of them. Like that, right? So I was just bringing me 1,000 pair in every color. And so either they pay the fine and they pay the tariffs and the taxes, or they have to go to court. And if they go to court and the court determines that they were lying, then it becomes a problem of, you could get your ass put in jail. Period. All right. Now, one of my last questions that I had asked was, what the hell is going on with Somalia, right? Well, there is part of the population of Somalia that has fought with their government and has declared themselves Somaliland. Right? So this is something that, the world and the globe is looking at, and they're saying, no, we don't want this to be a precedent where a group of people can, emerge, in the middle of a place and then, just incorporate themselves as a whole country by themselves. So, yeah. I was trying to figure out, what happened in Somalia, and how come there was so many Somalians over here, and how did they get, how did they get in, with asylum when they weren't going to war with any foreigners, right? So Somalia and Nigeria are both countries that are fighting civilly, and a lot of them had came over to America asking for amnesty, asylum, because they're warring, but they're warring amongst themselves. And this is where a lot of the other countries and governments are saying, no, this is not the kind of asylum that they want to honor. They don't want to honor civil war, foreign asylums, that's different, but civil war, no. So I was wondering, what the hell was going on there, and what the hell was going on in Nigeria, because they're both at war internally. And technically, you could say that that's what is also going on with the Ukraine and Russia, but not really, because here's what we have to understand. What we have to understand is a lot of these superpowers, right? These superpower governments, would claim foreign lands as part of their territory. Oh, I wonder what happened here. What the hell? Was I stupid to stop? Go ahead. I don't know what they got going on here, but it looks like they have people just crossing the roads. I guess they kind of shut down the roads for the lights or something, or they're having some kind of block party. Yeah, some kind of block party. And that's cool. Over here in this ritzy neighborhood. Yeah. And even though the people who left during the Civil War, right, asking for asylum over here in America, was still pledging allegiance to the country that they were asking to be freed from. And America was like, oh, hell no, right? That's kind of like, asking for a restraining order, and then, you're purposely going back, to visit the place where you got the restraining order. Right? It's like you're making a fool of the courts, and the courts don't like to be made a fool of. All right? So, and and a lot of them were sending money back to their country. So that really, made the whole asylum thing cost more than they wanted it to cost. Of course, this isn't towards, anybody that was, working on behalf of America. Of course, if somebody was working on behalf of America, for America, and, was seeking asylum and had to leave their country, that's not the case. That's how they see the asylum should work. Because you're dealing, you were helping America, and you can appear to be a traitor in your country. So understanding that it would make sense to let you come to America. See? It's 70 degrees out here, y'all. 70 degrees out here. So, what else? Now, Trump, with his influence, right, he was able to get a lot of money, right? And even though the Democrats here keep trying to make Trump out to be a devil, okay? Trump is liked worldwide, right? He's liked worldwide. And even places where they don't like him, they respect him. Because, he is at least, trying to negotiate, avoid wars, and keep the peace, and so many of the time, so much of the time, people want to capitalize off of unfair treatment, right? And the wealthy has been telling the rich and the poor, listen, you don't have enough assets to bargain with. And the rich and the poor decide together, believing that the wealthy were the criminals. Now, granted, the ones that are wealthy, yes, they might have been the criminals that came in, made all of these land claims and started farming and they wasn't the squatters, right? The squatters was the ones that wanted to be like, the ones that were actually, savvy enough to make the land claims. Okay. Getting back to the point. The point is that whatever the black people thought that they was going to get the reparations, right? The mere fact that they tried to get reparations even before the Indians got reparations, ain't nobody going to get the reparations, right? Then the mere fact that y'all showed your ass with the rioting and shit and caused billions of dollars in damage, they were like, oh, well, if that's where you want your reparations to go to, that's where we're going to, that's where the reparation money's going to go to. You could have had some of that billions of dollars in your hand, but we're not going to be sitting up here, living on desolate land because, you acted an asshole. Right? That's why some of you are now sitting up there talking about, probably kicking yourself in the ass talking about, damn, if we hadn't a riot, if we had just went along with the program, if, if woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right? And still, even right now, because now the distractions are dissolving and we're starting to see who some of the real perpetrators are, which is part of our justice system, who have been collaborating with some of these Democrats and some of these liberals, because you don't know the difference between a liberal and a Democrat. Do you? Do I? No, we don't know the difference. And the Democrats were so desperate trying to win that they joined forces with the anarchy of the liberals. Now, back a long time ago, when we used to think of liberal in a civilized world, a liberal was a person who voted on the subject matter rather than for the party, right? They didn't have the same beliefs or all of the beliefs as of one party, so they considered themselves to be a liberal, and they wanted to vote on subject matters, right? Because if you vote as a party, then you just voted for all of the things that, they had made proposals for. But as a liberal, you had to vote for each separate, item or issue individually. That's what a liberal used to be, right? Today, a liberal has been monopolized and perverted by anarchy, right? And I had talked about how, men had the tendency to pervert things, right? You just give them enough time and a chance to do it, and they will pervert it. Okay? Such as I told you about the word salad, right? The word teabag, the word there's a million words. Gay, rainbow, all of those words are perverted by not the like liberal in the sense that, you know, they were supposed to be liberal, but the lawless. And this is what people don't seem to understand. I understand it. We've been trying to spell it out to you. And even when you see rioting in the streets, even when you see people setting fires to homes and things and places, you know, you still don't do the math that equals anarchy, lawlessness. So anyway, you have to know that there's a group of people out here. They're not the old-fashioned liberal. The old-fashioned liberal wanted to deal with each issue and vote on the issue rather than being a part of a party and just going along to get along. Right? The anarchy are people that just reject government, period. Right? And yet they're the first people in line when it comes to food banks. They're the first people in line when it comes to, you know, having their concubines, you know, line up for food stamps, or having their illegitimate kids, you know, be taken care of by the state. Otherwise, what would happen to them? Otherwise, what would happen to them? You all keep saying, oh, you know, they'll get their act together. But we seen in 2020 that didn't happen. We seen that. We seen it again last November when they cut off the food stamps. They didn't come and help you. But it was those strangers that helped you. The kindness of strangers are like, damn, you know. They don't even see that the people who are hurting them the most is the ones that are in their own families, in their own neighborhoods. Those are the ones that have thrown them underneath the bus. So, we talked about what's going on with the apps. We talked about, you know, where this, you know, fake woke, right? How the hell are you woke and you have no compassion? How the hell are you empathic and you don't feel no need to stop the pain? Come on now. Come on now. So, there's a lot of fake woke people out there, you know. there's a lot of people out there that are, pretending like they're spiritual. There is a lot of propaganda out there because because of the lies that was told. Right? Now, the question is, okay, so our society, they lied to you about religion. Okay? If they were to be honest and just say, all right, we lied to you about religion, we just needed you to comply, to have faith in humanity, and that we were all on the same page, and that whatever happened to one of us, it would happen to all of us. Right? So, let's just say the religious community admits that they had lied about religion. Okay? If that's what you want them to do, say it. Say it. Say that you want our religious communities to admit the lies that they have told about religion. Right? Admit that Eve didn't come from Adam's rib. Admit that Eve was actually Adam's offspring and it was incestual. Admit that God never intended on men having multiple wives, because it created problems in terms of hierarchy amongst the children. And even though he may think that while he's here and alive that he has it under control, but what if he gets sick? What if he dies? What happens then? You have brother against brother. Child against parent, parent against children, stepchildren. And it is just dastardly that they would sit up there and turn around and call women gold diggers, while at the same time forcing women to exist under the ruleship of a man. It's like, what? What I'm saying is, they made it impossible for women to live without a man. Right? Because they were afraid. They talked to their daddy, and they told their daddy, the women, if they can support themselves, they won't even want us. You'll never get that grandson that you wanted. Yeah, we can trick them, we can, get them to like us and all of this stuff. But now they're starting to see that even that was a fallacy. Right? That whole premise of thinking that, marrying a child was going to give them, the opportunity to train children to be obedient, an obedient family. No, these men don't have time to raise a whole family. They don't even have the knowledge to raise a whole family. Right? So then they were like, okay, well, educate the woman to raise the child, to raise the children and educate them so that he can go out and go to work. But he still didn't want to give her no freedom. He didn't want to give her no equity. He didn't want to give her no respect. He still wanted to treat her like a slave, right? And we've seen that when he got out in the world, he couldn't make a living by himself for the family. Now she had to figure out a way to hold down the household, raise the children, help this man with the income, right? And he still won't say, oh, damn, she's superwoman. No, instead, he's like, thanks for the kids, now get out. No, you can't have nothing, right? And like I said, it's just going to be a matter of time before these sons are going to be just totally disgusted with their parents, or mainly their father. I know lots of guys who are disappointed that, they don't have an inheritance. They're like, damn, how come they don't have an inheritance? And if they were really to find out and accept the answer is, well, they don't have an inheritance because their father has remarried a couple of times. And he's now with a woman that's half his age. And she got a baby by him. That's where your inheritance is going to go. That's why so many of them, they don't even want to go to the funeral. They're like, fuck that man. Right? And then others, they're trying to monopolize off of mom and making sure that she ain't getting with nobody else so that, they at least get some kind of inheritance from their mother if they can convince the mother to give the inheritance to the men of the family, right? And that could be a problem because some women are like, give all my children their fair and equal share, right? And that's how it's going to start out. And you can lose, some of your inheritance and only get what you deserve, right? Because if you're not a good family member, why would you get an inheritance? So, it is hot. I'm hot. I'm hot. Of course, I got some thermals on, but dang. And I did want to come out and get some ice cream. I wanted to come out here and get some ice cream. But thankfully, I've been out here driving long enough. I could have went to Brahms. Brahms has ice cream on sale. But what I'm going to do is see if I can make some ice cream from my protein, my cottage cheese ice cream. Because I had went ahead and defrosted one because it wasn't creamy enough. It turned it like into ice instead of like a pudding. And so I defrosted it, and then I put some milk and ice, and I blended it up. It became this nice shake. So yeah. So I am so glad that even though it's late, that I'm going to go ahead and, upload this video, because I covered a lot of things, oh my God. And one of the things that had happened, right, is YouTube had this little clip of my year in YouTube, and I was watching it, and it was giving like an analysis of what my videos were about. And I was cool with that, right? It basically was saying that my videos was involving cooking and diet and health and DIYs, and yeah, I was happy with that, because some of the stuff that come out my mouth, is enough to put me on the terrorist list. But like I said, you have to be careful with the things that you say. A lot of the people, want to get rid of Social Security, right? And it's like, how could you want to get rid of Social Security when these jobs out here, they're not offering pensions anymore? Matter of fact, they're not even offering disability insurance while you're on the job. Oh, matter of fact, they're not even offering health insurance. So now you don't want Social Security either? Okay, let's go down the list. No Social Security, disability, safety nets from the government because you don't want to pay taxes on it, right? The company that you work for, they don't want to give you a pension. They don't want to give you a 401k, right? They don't want to give you medical. You have to get your own medical. Right? You get hurt on the job. Oh well, too bad. Because there's no disability payment. I mean, you really need to think about the things that you say and they come out your mouth. Right? We're sitting up here talking about right now how disloyal these companies are. Many of them, they had offered, those programs, those incentives to work with them. But when they see that they don't have to offer those things and you'll be willing to work without benefits, and if you get hurt, you're going to be wandering the land like a nomad, hoping that, somebody watches your dumb ass on YouTube. They're not going to have time to watch you. Come 2026, right, which would be the year of the one, right? It will be like a new beginning. This is going to put people in a whole new mind frame to start anew. Whatever it is they can do. And it ain't going to be sitting up here just watching other people's YouTube. They might be starting their YouTube channel.